This is every mind-blowing illusion in Minecraft, starting with a big fat yes. Or actually, let's see. You ever wish a yes or no question had a choice for all of the above? Well, that's where this build comes in. Since with this strange bit of perspective, we're able to set up an illusion so that from this angle, it looks like yes, and then from over here, it looks like no. And then from other angles, it looks like ness, but you can ignore those angles. It's really the two that we're caring about. But what I love so much about this illusion is just how classic it is to Minecraft. I mean, this example that we're showing here by the Malta 87 was built 11 years ago, back before Minecraft is even released. And while you do need to build up quite a bit of scale for this to actually work, I think the results are pretty impressive when you go through with it. Now, when you look at just this carpet by itself, you can easily tell that the lines are straight, but add in some staggered stripes of black and white, and now those lines of carpet don't look as straight as they used to be. But the really simple optical illusion here is just by having the lines look as if they're shifting, can make it look as if the colored carpet that we put on top now starts to go diagonally up, diagonally down, it's all over the place. And I love how even when you know how this one works and take away the black and white lines, it's still enough to break your head. Similar to our yes and no illusion, this cube looks like just that, a cube. But what from this angle looks like a full cube rendered out, when we move off to the side, you can see that it's not actually connected all the way around. And at this point, I think I would just prefer looking at it from this side angle here. How's this ladder casting a shadow in Minecraft? Well, it's not a shaders mod, and it's actually not even its shadow. Since when we move off to the side here, you can see that the ladder is just simply painted in such a way where if you stand from the right angle, it looks as if it's actually leaning on the wall. But the truth of the reality is that there's not even a ladder, just a wall. And a floor, I guess. For this Minecraft illusion, you don't have to build anything. It's just gonna cost you 30 bucks, since that's the cost of a Minecraft account. Because truly, just having your skin set to one like this, we're able to make it so that when you look around in F5 and follow the camera, it seems as if the eyes are following you. And the reason for that happening is that we have the hat layer set up in such a way where it parallaxes against the background, making it look as if our eyes are following you, even if our head isn't. And this is probably the point where you would make a joke about bombastic side-eye, but I'm 21 and even I feel too old to do that. So, next section. Now, I'm not someone who likes glazed terracotta. I just usually think the pattern's too busy. But with this floor example, I think it looks quite nice. But that has nothing to do with the pattern and everything to do with this illusion. Since once we jump, you're gonna notice that this wasn't just a regular set of blocks, but actually full-size glazed terracotta patterns made to look like the smaller blocks. So then, when you stand at the right angle on top of this one, it mixes together nicely with the other examples. And sure, if you really were to study it, you could see some cracks in this illusion, like the fact that we can't match every color of the texture perfectly with actual blocks. But come on, look me in the eyes and tell me with a straight face that this couldn't fool you for just a little bit of a second. When you're talking about Minecraft illusions, there's truly nothing that you can do better than the Immersive Portals mod. Don't believe me? Well, look at this. Now, that is a village, but it's also played out on top of our table. And this isn't the mini village mod. What's actually happening is that if we place a large portal over a village and then connect it to a smaller portal inside of a room, then because of the way that it scales things differently with the projection, it'll make it look as if that entire village has been shrunk down to a teeny size, giving you a cute little desk ornament, and giving the villagers the terrifying realization that they're being confronted by God. Right now, this wall doesn't look like much, but as we start to fly down, you'll notice that it actually gets bigger and bigger as we go. Now, no, it's not being loaded in, and there's definitely no redstone trickery here, since what's actually happening is that if we move to the side, you can see that all this is a staircase that just moves away from us as the player, and then gets wider and wider towards the base. So, from the right angle, it looks like it's actually growing as we move. And then from this angle, it looks like just a bad parkour course. And really, outside of making this as an illusion, I can't say that there's even a point to using this for your actual walls and builds. It ends up costing more blocks than the wall would have in and of itself. But when you get the effect all placed together like this, it's hard to say it doesn't look cool. When you get up close to this one, it's hard to tell what's going on, because really, there's nothing to see from down here. But then as we start to pull back, all those smaller squares that we added into the pattern will eventually become larger squares until, as we zoom out even more, you get to see this distorted effect on the square outline, giving you a wavy square effect when there's really no waves in sight, and also a bit of artifacting as the game tries to render this all in one image. But when you look past that, you can see that truly all these lines are straight. Follow along any part of this square and you'll notice that it all lines up. But taking the image as a whole, because of the way that we have the square patterns going inside of the actual squares, it tricks your eyes so that you're thinking that you're following a non-straight line. And then add in some heavy contrast of black and white squares, the effect gets pretty good, even when you know how it works. Minecraft's a game made of cubes, not circles. So how does this work? But really, there's actually no circle here. But really, we're just getting the illusion of one by changing the line thickness outside of the circumference. So while the lines are nice and thick inside of what would have been the circle, when it gets to the outer edge, they fade off into the regular line width. Which not only gives us this cool circle effect, but it also gives the illusion of depth too, making it seem as if the circle was placed inside of these different pyramids. When really, there's no pyramids and there's no circle. The image is entirely flat. This structure is impossible, at least from this angle. But because we used flat colors like concrete, we're able to make a very convincing looking twisting structure in the middle of our world. And how we built this gets a lot more obvious as soon as we fly over to the side here. Really, well, almost all of the A shape is built in this one flat style. By just having this edge come off of the top, then when we stand at it from a diagonal, we can place it so that that top part looks like it's resting on top of the part closest to us. And then to sell it even further, what Atomax EP does here is that in blocks that are differently colored to give the illusion of the shadow working properly. And that's a good touch. Now, what's so special about this wall? Well, for starters, it's not even a wall. Since once we move out of the prime viewing spot, you can see that not only is this not a wall, but literally none of the rings are touching each other. They're all in completely different planes, and most importantly, built out of a flat color. Otherwise, any kind of texture here would just give away the illusion. Take a look at these two holes on a flat surface. Now from this angle, it's very clear to see which one of these is the deeper hole, but that also doesn't make any sense since how would it be this flat? It's impossible. And the truth is that it's really not that one hole is deeper, but rather that it's taller. And as soon as we fly over to the side, you're gonna see that the deeper one is actually just a taller tower, making our super flat world anything but. And this ends up working really well if you build both of these very close to the void limit. Much like we have here, you can't place anything underneath this bedrock, but by placing things above the bedrock, we can sure make it look as if we did. And to me, I think that works quite well. Now at this point, we've been showing you a number of different builds that come together to make one illusion. But how about one build that puts together 4 illusions in one? Now for starters, if you look down to the top of this cube, your eyes will play tricks so that it looks like there's dots appearing at each one of the intersections. When in reality, there's nothing of the sort. It's just the way that your eyes take in the different contrast between these intersecting lines. But that's not the only illusion, since when we fly over to the side, we see that it wasn't actually just a square plane board, but rather itself a cube. And then from this angle, it's not even a cube at all. In fact, it's hollow, missing some of its faces. And then when we fly over to the ground level, that cube suddenly looks like we just have a square awning placed on a stick. And now the bottom of what would have been that cube just looks like a shadow. Bam, 4 illusions in one. From the right angle, this build looks like a pit inside of a pit, which I guess would be a pit. But upon a closer inspection, it's actually just a flat build that we're using different shades of gray blocks to create the shadow effect. And this is something that you might have seen done painted on the floor of different conventions or public areas. From the side, it looks like a warped perspective mess, but when you look at it from the right angle, it looks as if there's depth to the flat floor. And really, there's no difference to doing it in Minecraft. It's just cheaper, you don't have to buy paint. Take a good look at this, it just looks like a regular ice cream sandwich. And if you fly just right, it even seems as if it's built that way. So what's so special? Well, as soon as we move off of that charted path, it turns out that the ice cream itself is actually separated from the sandwich, which is not only an illusion, but also an identity crisis. I mean, what's an ice cream sandwich without ice cream? But really what this has made me realize is just how much the book texture looks like an ice cream sandwich. When you look at these floating blocks, they look like they're towering over the build below. And that's in no small part thanks to the big shadows that they're casting. But even knowing that that's not how Minecraft's lighting engine works, it still looks pretty convincing, which is made all the more impressive by the fact that when you fly down to these floating blocks, they are floating, but not by as much as you thought. In fact, they're only 1 block off of the ground. And then just by using darker colors of concrete and other colored blocks, we give the illusion of these artificial shadows that darken the ground. Instead of building a volcano in your next Minecraft world, you should really just build a portal, since that's what user Potato Boy did on Reddit and got the exact same effect. Now, thanks to the Immersive Portals mod, if you set up a portal on the other side of the nether, then when you glance through the top of our so-called volcano, you'll be glancing straight into the fire and the flames. And with shaders like they're using here, the effect gets even better. And a sacrifice of people in the nether is going to be even better at getting the job done than some volcano would. So get ready for a bountiful harvest this year. Let's take a look at this confusing display. Since from this angle, we just have a dirt block floating in a room, but it gets even weirder when we step to this side. Not only does the wall that should have been here disappear, but now our dirt blocks turn into copper. And then with another rotation, our copper turns into gold. And honestly, I think we have this alchemy thing figured out. Then finally we could walk around to the last remaining wall and see that the gold turned into diamond. And I'll say that if this was a multiple choice test, I think the answer's pretty easy. Or it would have been, but in our case, it ends up being all of the above. Or rather, that you should go above and then go through the roof, since that's where you get the netherite block. Or that sometimes you just need to look at something from a different point of view to end up getting the best return. As we've shown off already, the Immersive Portals mod offers the ability to change large scenes into 1x1 frames, which means they can essentially take a large landscape and have it appear as a small diorama, which is how we're able to get this whole mess. Where you can see this village house placed on the trapdoor like so, but then when we flip open this trapdoor, we can climb into that very same house, even appearing as if we're rendering sideways on that diorama when we placed it. And after looking at this, I might be losing my grip on reality too. By looking into this hole, we've got ourselves a perfect cow spine machine. And best yet, the cow's none the wiser. And the way that we make this happen is having an immersive portal tied up together with a repeating command block so that it's constantly teleporting our portal directly over an entity that we want to watch. And the original poster on Reddit has an even more helpful set of rules that you can see here on screen. Make the portal, name it with the command, and then with a repeating always active command block, you have it constantly teleport the portal entity above whatever entity that you want it to follow, giving us the perfect crystal ball to spy on your friends or your enemies. I won't judge. You ever wonder how hamsters are able to run in those balls for hours? Yeah, I know, I don't get it either. I also don't get anyone who's able to run, period. But after looking at this illusion by Rockin' X10, I can at least see some of the fun to it. At first look, this seems like a pretty cramped hallway, but halfway through we're walking through an immersive portal so that we're not actually walking to the other side of the hallway, but rather falling into it, until eventually we have this repeating circle illusion. And God, you might not want to eat before you try this one. It can get a little disconcerting, but come on, it's still pretty cool. One of the most iconic real-world illusions that we can see in Minecraft is the barbershop pole illusion. And while in real life that's done by rotating a cylinder like this, how did we do that here, where both rotating and cylinders aren't exactly a thing? Well, when we remove the cover, you can see that sure enough, actually no part of this is rotating, but rather moving. And we just have a repeating command block system that moves our pattern behind this cover. It's pretty cool, but I can't imagine you get much of an application for it in your Minecraft world. I mean, Steve's looked the exact same since 2011 and hasn't needed a haircut, so you might be out of business if you open up a barbershop. How do we put this slab in a glass block? Well, we didn't use anything like the world border trick, but rather, it's just that the slab isn't there in the first place. And what I mean by that is clearly visible when we zoom out. Yeah, you get the picture. Taken after this example from Adamax EP, if we build a slab separately and then place our glass block in the foreground, then we can make it look as if all of that giant slab fits perfectly within this tiny glass shell. And then with a piston nearby to sell the illusion, it seems as if we push the slab inside the glass block, even though we obviously know that's not the truth. Fear of the dark is pretty common, and fear of the unknown is even scarier, which is why this might be such an ominous sight. See, here we have the illusion of emptiness made up from building 4 walls of unlit black concrete like so. And the result is something that looks a lot more like the void than the actual void in the game. And I think this perfectly goes to show that what you can't see is infinitely more spooky than what you can. So if you're looking for a new tunnel for your next haunted house, this might be the pick come Halloween. For a fairly standard house, this is one that we've got our eye on. Or more appropriately, it's got its eye on us. You see, when utilizing a bit of depth on the side of the roof and some black material here, something of a face starts to appear, which is quite a surprise for sure. And while you might not be able to see what's happening from the front, we can catch a bit of a smolder from the side. And even if that doesn't hold a candle to the rock himself, it could make for some pretty solid real estate. The death and loading screens are a staple of Minecraft, and they're so commonplace that by this point, no one's surprised by them. But we can use that to our advantage. Taken after this user, we can make a giant version of the respawn screen in our creative world. And with the help of map art, we can make this even more convincing. Then, after we place these down at spawn, we can fool anyone who respawns into seeing yet another respawn screen when they least expect it, letting us watch from the sidelines and get quite the laugh while we're doing it. No matter where we stand, this crocodile will always be looking at us. And that's because of the illusion of depth. See, the same way that this trick works in the real world, you'll notice that when we get up close, what's happening here is that the face is hollowed out in such a way where with just a few walls, we're able to give the illusion of a turning crocodile head regardless of where we're standing. This basement looks big, but it's actually smaller than you think, since the truth is that by using the ray tracing features of Bedrock Edition, all we need to do are place down some mirrors, or in this case, red nether brick, as the ceiling to give the illusion that your basement is twice the size that it actually is. And there you go, you double the size of your build without having to double the price as well, giving us a cheap trick that I'm more than happy to use for my wallet. Adding a bit of color to your house can go a long way, and by that logic, this colorful contraption should help out a ton. Though as the title says in this post, it's maybe more fit for giving you a migraine than a masterpiece. Here you'll notice that the player lined up a 2-block hole with a full-scale build behind it, which is an odd sight for sure. And while it's easy to admire the skill put in, anyone can just as easily tell that this jar of jelly beans just doesn't match up. But hey, it's impressive nonetheless. This user made what appears to be a beautiful painting laid out on an easel, but obviously you're not able to get that level of depth through just a flat texture. So what's really happening here is that we have a staircase of that build for the painting that goes deeper than the easel itself. But when you look at it dead on, it sure does look like it's painted there. Which goes to show that if you want something to look extra complex in 2D, you've really just gotta build it in 3D and lie. Why does this middle part of the square look so different? Well, if we're flying around from up here, it's tough to notice. It just looks like it's floating up there. But once you get up close, it's easier to see that what's actually causing this is that we just offset some of the pixels that should have been there in the pattern. And sure enough, by using a trick that simple, as soon as you step back, it really does sell the illusion. Minecraft blocks come in one shape and size. That is, until today. See, by using distance and a clever stair-step-like build, we can make it seem as if the block that we placed is actually quite small. In this way, we practically guarantee that any visitors would be left with a question mark as to how it works. But besides a prank, you might actually find yourself using this on a larger scale. And really, we'll leave the finer details of that to you. But I will say, this could make for a real mind-bending entrance to your next base. Since the maps in Minecraft are able to be one perfectly flat color, you're actually able to create some pretty cool optical illusions. And folks, my favorite one of these yet probably has to be this eye that seemingly follows you wherever you walk. Whether you're off to the left or right, it's still gonna be looking right at you. And while I'm sure you all could get creative on the different ways this inanimate eye spies on your players, one that I'd particularly like to see is building this kind of eye inside of an actual Guardian statue. That way, even if you're not gonna get blasted by their beam effect, it's still gonna be pretty unsettling to have this follow you around. Now, while map art can do a lot of great things, animation isn't one of them. And usually to get that effect, we need to use some extensive command blocks or redstone to make it happen. But with this illusion, if you focus in on it, I'm sure you can notice that it's already in effect. What's happening here is that by trying to focus on the lines between the ovals, the image starts to look wavy, which is more than a little disorientating. But it could be a great piece for your art gallery. And as long as no one gets sick, it's well worth that. This illusion feels straight out of an MC Escher painting, because when you look at the walls, you'll see that the stairs somewhat defy gravity, and it's hard to tell which one of these is actually going in the right direction. And if you're not careful with this one, you'll find that it's pretty good at disorienting you. Though I guess if you were to use something like the up and down and all around mod, at that point gravity doesn't matter either, so you'd be able to walk into any of these doors just fine. If you have a fear of heights, this might make you feel a little uneasy, but don't worry, because the truth is that this hole's no deeper than just having a flat sheet of paper. But the reason that it would trick you to feel that way is because by using flat colors like this black and white, you're not going to see a lot of variety between the textures, which allows us to then make this pattern, which in such a way gives the illusion of it getting deeper and deeper to the center of the hole, even though, as we can clearly tell, that's not the case. After a while of playing with your friends, it can get tough to impress them, but building up a full netherite beacon should do the trick. Though getting all the netherite to make that happen is actually a tough hurdle to cross. So instead, what if we want to make this happen for a fraction of the price? Well, using this method, we can make it seem like we're the richest on the server, when in fact, we're barely cutting it. But hey, as long as they don't snoop around the other side, this should be fairly convincing, and that could earn us the respect that we're looking for. If we were to build out our wall with these alternating zigzag shapes that go deeper and deeper in, then once you stand at the top and look down, you'll notice that we created these weird ripple effects that come through your wall. But I should clarify that to get this effect, you can't just look at it dead on, but rather for it to work, you're gonna have to look down towards the bottom right, which is the way that the waves go. And looking at this example made out of sandstone stairs, it's almost like we got our own slice of the sand dunes right here at our very base. Let's face it, visiting the Nether is not a fun time. It's hot, it's ugly, and the locals aren't exactly friendly. So to get a taste of the second dimension from the comfort of the overworld, let's take after this. Here, instead of lighting the Nether portal, this user decided to make a picture frame out of it, which instead lends us a detailed depiction of the Nether out the back. And while it might be a bit disappointing once you step through, it's much safer than anything we'd see in the actual Nether. And thankfully so, might I add. When you stand still, the blocks here look pretty basic. I mean, they're placed in a weird way, but it's just a grid effect, right? But it's when you start to fly around the outside that you notice that this dot matrix can really start to hurt your head. Sure enough, by having a 3D grid of these blocks separated like so, when you look at it from different angles, you get some pretty interesting effects. And honestly, I think what really sells this illusion here is by using some of the flat color blocks like we have in this example. Because if we tried to mix it up instead, then we'd just be left with sky grid. When you see a grid like this, your first instinct is probably a game of chess or checkers. But that's not what we'll see today. But instead, if we strategically place our crafting tables, we can take after this user and make it seem like one is much bigger than the other, which seems like nonsense at first. But the way that we do this is that when you build these, the squares must be 2 by 2 for each one. And then that way, when one crafting table is placed on the ground, the other can be placed 4 blocks into the air and give us the illusion of size. From this angle, the pyramid doesn't look that special, but when you stand above it, we get a pretty weird effect. It's almost as if the pyramid itself is making into a rounded square of some sorts. And really, the whole reason this happens is because even though we have the blocks at different elevations, there's no shadows to be seen. So your brain never really recognizes the depth that's actually coming in. And instead, we just get this weird pillow effect. Mirrors are something that we still haven't one scene added to the base game. And while we could use a mod, there's another solution in vanilla. See, as this user shows, if we make a mirrored version of our build like so, and then place glass in the middle, between the two, we get that mirror effect that we wanted, which is cool to see, even if it does take double the time to build. Though if you have world edit commands, those might help to speed this up. But even if it is a burden to make, the results won't go underappreciated. With the new mangrove trapdoor, we're able to make a pretty easy illusion, since if we just place one of these onto the front of a dispenser and flip it up like so, then from the right angle, it looks as if the eyes are following you along the camera. And there you have it, just like that, we've got a little watchful robot to keep an eye on you. Or if you want that same illusion, but you want a different eye color, then by just placing a fence post behind the trapdoor, you get the same effect, making this pretty diverse in how it works. Figuring out how to start building your Minecraft dream home can be a real challenge, but when your house works like a fever dream, then that might be on the right track. At first glance, all that's visible is this tiny house, but on the inside, you'll see a much larger picture. You see, if we lay out the viewing angle just right from this entrance, we can give the illusion of a much larger house inside the little shack. And even if it becomes less convincing once we walk around, from the right view, it's still a real sight to see. Now, if you scroll through your YouTube recommended, you've likely seen this illusion show up in a thumbnail once or twice. So let's break down how it works. See, what's happening here is that if we place 3 sea lanterns like so in the corner of a room, it'll give the illusion of a weird rotating cube. And that's a strange sight for most any angle that you stare at it. But hey, now you know how it's done, and as long as your friends don't, this could still offer up a solid practical joke to put to use. This dirt house doesn't look like much, and really from the outside, it's not. But one step through this door, and we're treated to something a lot more special. And really, the secret that's at play here is that we have a portal that's at the entrance of the small house so that we seamlessly teleport you to the inside of a much larger one. And then, as soon as you exit out, you're gonna be greeted to that same smaller house. But even though this particular one was done with the help of the Immersive Portals mod, you don't necessarily need to do it like that. Even just having seamless command block trickery would be a way to pull this off in vanilla as well. How did this zombie get so much bigger than this other one? Well, while I can answer that, the truth is, neither of them are. Or rather, they're both the same size. They're offset in just a way so that this one that's close to us looks bigger in the background, whereas the one that's further away seems to be smaller, even though it's not that closer up. And honestly, the whole way that this works is by using a tunnel like this, since by having those flat geometric shapes, it makes it a lot harder for your eye to tell what's going on. So it just figures that by relative scale, that's how big one zombie is compared to the other, even if, as we know, they're both the same size. Now, I'm usually not a big fan of heights, but this seems too good to pass up on. If you were to look down from this angle, you'd notice quite the view down below, but it turns out that's just another fake. And rather, this user took the time to fill out multiple maps of the surrounding area and then stitched them together to make this, which makes for a much cooler floor than what we're used to. And that way, even if it looks like we're way up in the clouds, we can still experience it all from the comfort of the ground floor. In Minecraft, you've got regular glass, stained glass, tinted glass, and now foggy glass. But really, this is just an illusion that we were able to pull off by using different layers of colored glass in the background. Since by stacking together walls of stained glass with a 1 block distance between them, you get this neat fog effect as it starts to get darker and darker into the glass, which works if you want a frosted glass window, or it might be a cool way of getting a bottomless pit effect like this. But again, just remember that 1 block distance between layers, otherwise it doesn't work as well. Living in a desert has its benefits, but lush greens just aren't one of them. And seeing as leaves we bring here will desaturate to the biome's color map, our garden looks a little bland, where it would be if it weren't for azaleas. See, when we shear the leaves off an azalea tree and place them down in another biome, they don't change color with the location, meaning we can have the illusion of fresh trees grown right out in the desert. And while your friends wonder why their oak trees look worse than yours, we'll have quite the oasis to see. When you're inside, this elevator feels like it could go on forever, and apparently that's more than true, since what's happening here is that when we press this button, it isn't the floor that's going up through the elevator, but rather the walls that are coming down. Sure enough, if this user shows off, with a little bit of command block trickery and some distinct patterns, we can make it seem as if we're constantly going up this elevator shaft. But when you step outside, it turns out that nothing's actually moving. And while this illusion only really works if you're standing on the inside, it is still pretty cool to watch from the outside as well, almost like a barbershop pole illusion. At first glance, this may seem like just any other house, maybe a bit on the smaller side, but otherwise nothing unusual. Though with a closer look, you can see that this isn't some bad texture pack, but rather it's a supersized scale model of the real thing. Let me explain. Here, the creator built it pixel by pixel to recreate each block type within the house, and then they copy and pasted their mega blocks to build something that looks like a regular house. And while using scaled blocks like this might be a tall order, it's definitely fun to see once it's all laid out. Walking through walls sounds like quite the superpower to have, but doing that without glitches should be impossible, or it was until this user's discovery. See, by using these immersive portals, we can give off the illusion of walking through a solid mirror. And while pulling this off might require some prior knowledge of the mod in question, as long as you light the portal properly and add in the glass, we can still walk through as planned, letting you trade places with yourself and likely leave a group of confused bystanders when you do, which is well worth trying out, trust me. I want you all to take a look at my new house. Now, it's pretty basic from this angle, but what's really interesting about it is when we step back and yeah, I think you get the point. See, the trick here for selling this illusion is by using directional blocks that we can place sideways. So then when you build your house into a wall and then look up at it, it still looks like it would on the regular floor. Granted, you have to fly up this pathway, but from first person, that's a lot less noticeable than it is in Replay Mod. But just make sure that you're careful when you step outside of the front door, or rather fall outside of the front door. You can't be too careful with this one. Pranking your friends is a rite of passage on a multiplayer server, and hey, we're plenty guilty of that as well. So to give them a run for their money, why don't we hit them where it hurts? Their diamonds. See, by using a few item frames and map art, we can create a pretty convincing diamond ore, or at least convincing from this side, since when you walk around to the other end, it's proven fake. And by that logic, we can make just about any decoy block in the game that we dream of, which offers quite the surprise if you ask me. What's wrong with this building? Well, from this angle, it's hard to tell, but what's really going to set you off is when you go over to the side and see that none of the blocks that we thought connected actually were. Even this ladder was never actually connected to the real roof above. And really, it's just that if you space out the blocks in such a way, when you look at it from the right angle, then it gives the convincing amount of depth that you need to make this illusion do it. Which is cool, but don't try to get up and close and actually climb that structure. You'll be sorely disappointed. How does this river flow? Because if you try to follow it around with your eyes, it clearly pours down here, but then the water somehow also ascends up to that top level. It's confusing to say the least. But what seems like a break in physics is really just the result of a cleverly placed water feature, since instead of having a waterfall, we have a water tower that starts to sell the illusion from the right angle. And then by adding in some boats for extra detail, it really starts to look like we did this legit. To many in the community, the Aether Portal is something of a white whale to see, and I'm sure many of us were disappointed to see it fail like this when we tried. But with Bedrock, we might have ourselves a solution, or at the very least, a workaround. Apparently, when utilizing waterlogged stairs and blocks like so, we can strategically set up some floating water inside the glowstone frame. And then, even after we break the pistons and stairs, the water will remain inside our new Aether Portal. Just remember, it'll disappear once you reload the world. If you've ever felt like someone's watching you, then you know it's a creepy concept, and this example should bring out those same feelings. See, as you move around the head, the eyes will track you like so, or at least that's what you'd think, because with some extra depth, the redstone can move along the black background for a scary sight. But even when you do know how they work, it's hard to say they're not effective, or at the very least, unsettling. In a game made of cubes, getting a convincing circle is a tough concept, but with a mix of cleverly placed stairs and blocks, we can start to get a pattern like this. And to go a step further, by using a mix of item frames and torches, we can use this command to place seemingly illegal decorations off of the grid. So while you might have to trust the process to pull this off, the end result is nothing short of mind-bending. And if anything, it's just weird to finally place torches on a stair block. It just doesn't look right. Make sure to pay attention, because this one's a little confusing. And you'll see what I mean as soon as we start to zoom away from this pyramid. Appropriately called the Pyramid of Confusion, what's happening here is that we have squares built with a certain pattern, so that each of their points looks like a spike coming out of the pyramid. And honestly, looking at this one for too long starts to hurt my head. So we might need some kind of refresher just to give your eyes a break on screen. But genuinely, if you want to build this, I'd recommend just building one of these squares as a sample, and then copy and pasting them through World Edit. That way you can build this headache-inducing build without giving yourself a headache in the process. If you're falling from a great height, water's the all-star pick for safety, and we can use that idea to our favor. See, if you're looking to get even with someone on the server, this water illusion is a solid candidate to do so. As you'll notice, by making several custom maps with a water design like so, we can make a convincing spot for them to land on. Only once they aim for that puddle, they'll just break their legs on a couple of item frames, and that should be a rude awakening for sure. This chase scene will never end, and the reason for that is because we're chasing ourselves. See, by cleverly using these portals from the Immersive Portals mod, we are able to create our own infinite hallway. And because of the mirror effect that you get from using multiple of these portals, it almost looks like we're chasing ourselves down an infinite sequence, which would be why that if you turn around, you'll also still be chasing yourself. Or rather, you're getting chased. I honestly don't know how that works. But really, when the physics are this wonky, I don't think anyone else could. And hey, if you're only looking to build one room, then this is a way to get an infinite amount of use out of it. Literally. Now, as far as Minecraft's concerned, circles are a rare sight, but once again, the community's found a way to make them happen. You see, when placing down glazed terracotta in a circle like so, and filling in the corners with diorite, we can see a perfect circle come out of the blend. And while While it's an illusion that may take a second for you to see, if you squint, it becomes quickly noticeable. And that way we get both a circle and an abstract piece as well, which is a win for both if you ask me. How is it possible that these stairs can always be going down? Because unlike other illusions, we're seeing the shadows here, so it sure does look like they're constantly going down. There's no trickery that way. So how do we get these Penrose stairs in Minecraft? Well, as Mumbo Jumbo shows off, the real secret here really just comes down to angles. Since, as you'll notice, we built most of the staircase going down as you'd expect, but it's just this little gap here that really sells it. And by filling in an extra gap of blue blocks so that the seam still works when you're looking at it, then we can make it so that when you look at it diagonally downwards, this staircase gets a whole lot more suspicious. Okay, so you've probably heard of the Headless Horseman, but what about the Bodiless Steve? See, after placing down some path blocks, we can throw a pig inside a minecart, hop on, and ride into the floor like so, with only our head to poke out of the top of the path, which can either startle your friends or lend to the weirdest game of soccer yet. And whichever option you choose, just make sure not to dismount the pig while you're down there. Otherwise, you'll go from an awkward situation into something a lot more uncomfortable. Which of these yellow blocks is lighter? Well, it might be easy to choose these ones, but if we remove the other colors, you'll notice that they're actually just the same color block. So why does this happen? Well, when you place the block on two differently patterned backgrounds, then it'll start to have a different hue when you look at each one. Because the yellow seems brighter than the green blocks next to it, but darker than the white blocks next to it, your brain fills in the gaps and makes one look much darker to you than the other one, given for a really confusing illusion. Though I guess it doesn't work if you're colorblind, but maybe it's confusing for a different reason then. If you're building out a base in the nether, then looking up at that same ugly red tinted sky can get pretty old pretty fast. I mean, at least in the overworld you get clouds, that's way more of a treat to look at. So if you want to recreate that, then you can actually do such by making windows or sky illusions in your base. And it definitely puts you on the right track to turning your underground base into way more of a Caesar's palace. So if you ever get bored of the trapped in lifestyle, this might be a way to get a change of scenery without actually having to, well, change the scenery of your base. And honestly, I don't know which one would be more effort to do. As it turns out, texture packs aren't the only place you can add animated textures to Minecraft. As you can see right here, if we split this map up into 4 quadrants and then play a simple 4-frame animation, then all we gotta do is rotate it. There you go, it's animated. Sure, it's very silly and it's probably not the most practical form of animation, but personally this takes me back to messing around with flipbooks as a kid. And when you see some of the examples that you can do when playing around with this, it's definitely worth a shot if you got the time. And if you don't want to spend the time slaving away at animation, I guess you could just make a 4-panel comic. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?